Hello there, people of the internet. I've made a couple of videos about all sorts of things in the past, and typically whenever I make a video talking about something that is more or less a more intense point of view, I'll get a bunch of people in my comments down below telling me that I need to get back to living in the real world because what I'm talking about is simply not true. And one that comes to mind is like the revolver debacle, whether or not revolvers are still a viable concept for a CCW. I would argue yes, but that's because they have certain perks and pros and cons in comparison to semi-autos, and that's a completely different discussion for a completely different video. But the point that I'm trying to make here is in discussions that are similar to that, where I'm talking about things, I'll talk about the cons of a revolver, and then I'll get a bunch of people telling me, in the real world, you don't need more than what a revolver has to offer. And the people that tell me that are typically people that I would assume have never actually been out into the real world. And they'll think that they have because they're, I don't know, old, or they feel like they've been through the ringer, or maybe they even have. Maybe they've actually been through the ringer in their life. But the real world that they're referring to, well, if your biggest worry in life is paying bills or making dinner or, I don't know, like going to work, or whether or not your vehicle is going to be able to make it to work or something like that, just the stereotypical things that we worry about in society nowadays, if that is your biggest worry, then you're not living in the real world. You're living in an anomaly that has popped up in extraordinarily recent human history by a tremendous margin. Most of human history is violent and bloody and gruesome and way, way beyond the realms of what we consider the real world by today's standards. If you think that the anomaly of the society that we live in is the real world, then I recommend going to a major city that is horribly crime-ridden, somewhere like Detroit, or one of those cities where it's known that things are really, really bad, like Chicago, or someplace like that, where crime runs rampant, and drugs run rampant, and the stereotypical standard of living is just not great. And if your world, if your real world is you just running in a circle in the same aspects of life that you've been doing for the past 50 years, then again, that's just an anomaly. That is you finding a way to live in your world as safely as possible. You wake up, you go to work, you come home, you cook dinner, you sit back, you watch, I don't know, the football game or Netflix or whatever the heck it is that you're doing. Then your biggest worry is some, I don't know, criminal kicking in your door, and you're like, all right, well, I got my revolver and that'll handle that problem. Most people in the world, even to this day, by today's standards, have far, far greater problems than somebody kicking in the door in their suburban household, or maybe you're living in the country where somebody might come up in a truck or something and decide to cause trouble. There are spots in the world where that being our worst fear is absolutely nothing in some of those locations. Like, there's certain major cities here in the United States. We're not even talking about other parts of the world, and I hate to tell you guys, but the United States is not the world. There's a lot more to the world than just the U.S., and I get that most of my viewers are here in the U.S., and that's probably why I get the amount of living in the real world comments that I do. Areas in the U.S. that are as bad as they are, that is United States soil. That's not us looking at some foreign country. That's not us coming up with some what if situation or what if scenario. There are spots in the US that are so horrendously bad that you have literal gunfire in the streets. You have armies of gangs fighting each other. There's certain parts in the US where we have literal invading forces coming into our country right now as we speak. Granted, there's a lot of speculation and whatnot that goes into that, and I don't want to get into that particular topic. But the bottom line is that there are very real, legitimate threats here. As a matter of fact, I actually just watched the Civil War movie not too long ago, and they had talked about how their grandfather or father or whoever it is that they were talking about was living in some countryside pretending that the United States was not in a civil war. And that is a really, really good example of somebody saying, I live in the real world and nothing bad ever happens, or not to the point to where like something like a revolver couldn't handle it. And it's because of their experience in their world that they live in, and they're completely ignoring what is happening, you know, all on the outside. I was going to say all around the world, but in that particular case, it was inside the United States. But in the real world, the United States is quite safe and secure depending on where it is that you go. But the real world is not just the United States. There are some significantly bad places in the world that you could go right now. You could hop on a plane right now, and your real world situation, your real world standard of living would just completely crumble. And if you are somebody who's already traveled the world and you've already experienced the worst of what, you know, the world has to offer, then odds are you are somebody who knows and understands just how bad the world could be. And for those who think that nothing bad will ever happen here inside the United States, again, there's spots in the United States right now where things are cripplingly horrible, and you can go there right now and see just how bad of some of these situations are. But if you think the United States will never turn into a terrible war-ridden zone, like take your pick of some other country that is a terrible war-ridden zone, and you're like, nah, nothing like that'll ever happen here in the U.S. I'm telling you right now, there is literally a 100% chance of that happening. Given enough time, as we look into the future, there is literally, like, as we give ourselves more and more time, there is an infinite number of possibilities of things that are going to happen. Like, if you have an unlimited amount of time, you are literally going to see everything occur, and the likelihood of something happening in the United States to the point to where it becomes completely war-ridden, I get that right now it is low, but there is a 100% chance that the United States will one day become a war-torn country. It's just going to happen. And right now, in the anomaly that we live in, the anomaly of time that we live in, things are good. But the issue is, all it takes is one man to start leading a country, one egotistical, egocentric man that wants to dominate the world, and we've seen this several times in history. It takes one man who doesn't give a damn how many hundreds of millions of people die. If people follow his word, then guess what? They're going to follow his word, and many times they'll oftentimes treat him like a god. But all it takes is one man who decides that he wants to absolutely set the world on fire. And all it takes is that one man with enough wealth and power and influence to get enough scientists to say, hey, guess what? Mutually assured destruction is now survivable because we have this XYZ thing, and the probability of us surviving that is within acceptable realms. And then that one man, his finger over that nuclear launch button gets pretty gosh darn heavy as he gets more and more irritated with the rest of the world, thinking to himself, these guys need to listen to me and I don't need to listen to them. And that is how world wars start, and we have seen that happen on several occasions. Just egotistical people. It's amazing how one single person can have the influence to completely change everything. And right now we have several examples of severely egotistical people with extraordinarily large amounts of power that are just completely glassing entire cities on the planet, and they don't give a damn how many people they destroy, including their own people. And if they are told, hey, mutually assured destruction is no longer a thing we have to worry about, then we have to worry. That's whenever our ideology of, that's whenever our anomaly really gets taken away and things become significantly real. Because all it takes is one man, and the likelihood of one man popping up to cause some kind of trouble on a global scale at this point it is likely to the point to where we are starting to see that in every generation. There are people that are alive who remember the last tyrannical, egotistical person and are around to see the next. And they see the next horrible disaster on the horizon. And I think a lot of that just has to do with the fact that people don't learn from past mistakes. Either that or they just don't really care. But very, 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 very rapidly, your anomaly that you're living in, your real world while you're sitting in your little bubble, can be very rapidly taken away. As a matter of fact, like I said earlier, there's plenty of places in the world right now or in the US that you can go where your little bubble's gonna pop. And you won't be able to live in your real world with your real world ideologies. The real world is not your community. The real world is not your state. And I'm willing to bet that you don't know the going-ons in just your single state alone. The real world is not your city. The real world is not the United States. The real world is made up by the interactions of like over 8 billion people as of right now, as of time of recording this. Hopefully that doesn't change. But if we look at just the people in the United States, right? There's approximately, 350 million people here. We'll go ahead and just use that number. I'm sure that there's more by this point in time, but we'll use 350 million. Let's go back to the revolver debacle, the revolver debate. Let's say that we live in a perfect society where everybody has a gun, everybody is armed, and so as a result, crime is way down because everyone who's a criminal knows that there is significant consequences for their actions, and they can no longer find soft targets. So let's say we have a perfect American society where everybody is armed, and for 90% of the people, a revolver is adequate, and I would argue that even in today's imperfect society, for 90% of people who just need a personal defensive weapon, a revolver will be fine. However, with 350 million people in the United States, 90% of them, that revolver is A-okay, no problem whatsoever. But that means 10% is not. But the people who live in the real world will think, all right, this will solve 90% of the problems, so I don't have anything to worry about. The likelihood of me needing something else is extraordinarily small, so I'm just going to carry around my 5-shot snub-nosed revolver. And I agree that the likelihood of you needing something bigger is extraordinarily small. But if we have 10% of people who are finding themselves in situations where that little snub-nosed revolver isn't gonna cut it, that's 35 million people where the real world situation, the real world solution isn't gonna be good enough for a solution for them. And that is just including the normal amounts of people who would use a personal defense weapon. That's not including all of the other things that could factor in to why a revolver would be a bad choice for that. Like, say, long-range target shooting or needing a shotgun to go bird hunting or something like that. But let's just say in this particular situation, this particular scenario, we have 35 million people who are unable to just do that very bare basic thing with what the real world solution calls for. And to put that into perspective, that's like 35 million people. That's approximately 10 times, a little over 10 times, the amount of people that are currently in the United States Armed Forces. So that's an army the size of 10 times of what the U.S. Army or U.S. military as a whole actually is, and that is an absolutely insane number of people where your real world solution wouldn't solve that. And I'm sure I've gotten a lot of speculation over the years saying that I myself haven't seen anything or haven't done anything, and that's true. There's a lot of people out there, especially in the comments down below, who have seen and done significantly more than I have, but that doesn't matter. What I'm saying ultimately doesn't matter. What I'm saying doesn't matter simply because the interactions between me and you in a whole scale of the entirety of what the real world actually is, that doesn't matter. In the entirety of the billions of people all interacting with one another, it doesn't matter what I convince you of or whether or not you decide to listen to anything I have to say. It doesn't matter if I speak at all. It's just not going to make any difference whatsoever. So my experience levels don't matter. What matters is what actually goes on in the world. Not your little world that you've been living in comfortably, but the real world. So there's my little rant for this. I don't know if I'm going to put this up. I just had to get that off my chest because I've been seeing so much live in the real world stuff. And the real world is not the real world because their world is not the real world. Thanks for watching, folks. I appreciate your time. Like, subscribe, share. Description below is a link to all sorts of stuff. Go check it out. You guys go off. Have yourself a fantastic day. I'll see you on the next episode.
Been a little while since I've done this. Bonnie and Clyde be damned. Poor man's Garen. It's a shame that bolt-action shotguns aren't more mainstream.